Let's have a roll call.
Chairman Morris,
Here.
Commissioner Blue,
Present.
Commissioner Cotton,
Here.
Commissioner Hesner,
Here.
Commissioner Heidner,
Here.
Commissioner Mulcrone,
Here.
Commissioner Gorog.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. We have no public hearings this evening, no development review, but we do have a discussion of a preliminary review of regulations pertaining to medical marijuana dispensaries and cultivation centers. And I suspect that, oh, Mike is back. But before we do, I need to make a disclosure. I'm a licensed attorney, and actually under the rules that I have my license, I'm prohibited by several rules from assisting anyone in the commission of a crime, and this is still a crime under federal law, the use, sale, possession, or cultivation of marijuana. So as a result of that, my participation, if you want me to continue, is limited to comments on compliance with state law, but nothing with regard to evading or avoiding federal law, because that would be the assisting a commission of a crime.
Okay.
Okay.
But it doesn't prohibit you from doing anything else.
What do you mean?
Well, what
Like
do you...
using marijuana?
What
Boy, we went there fast.
What can't you do?
I can't comment on how you could evade federal law through this.
Oh, all right.
Okay? Because it's still considered a crime. There are federal banking regulations that prohibit most banks from taking monies. There's federal insurance regulations that prohibit most insurance companies other than risk pools from insuring these businesses. And there's also things called currency reports and suspicious activity reports that typically have to get filed for these because of money laundering. So with that, I assume either Mike or Joe want to give some sort of input first, or background?
I can tee this up for Mike. So the state legislature passed a law allowing for the medical marijuana dispensaries and cultivation centers and allowed communities to pass certain certain reasonable zoning restrictions to allow for such locations. Primarily setback requirements involving either residential or away from schools, daycare centers, and other items that are outlined in your report. The maps that are in your packet, but also on the podium over there, indicate both the locations of the where cultivation centers and dispensaries would be located. As you can see on the cultivation center, the area where that's permitted, that's the one where there's a bunch of yellow, is extremely limited in scope of where state law allows for medical marijuana cultivation centers. Dispensaries is a different story. The village board had asked staff to look into this. We've had ongoing discussions probably over several months between myself, the building commissioner, Mike Atkinson, and our village attorney, Bob Kenny, discussing various restrictions, looking at other communities and what they were doing in terms of security enhancements, other items. We also discussed with our police chief different items related to security and everything from where garbage would be thrown away to secure locations, direct connect with alarm systems, those items. That resulted in a meeting before the committee of the whole, I believe in June, that discussed medical marijuana, specifically related to dispensaries and cultivation centers, which resulted in a very preliminary draft text amendment language that they advised be directed to the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is an item that we've kind of discussed very conversationally in several different meetings, just letting you know that was going to be coming before you to review. Prior to having a formal public hearing process where this item would be publicly notified as well as specific language discussed, we wanted to at least provide information to you and also provide you a forum to ask questions, something that we could take a look at. If there's specific items that you want us to take look at in terms of restrictions, we can discuss that with our village attorney, make sure that it's not overly restrictive, while also making sure that we're getting as well crafted a text amendment as we can to bring back before you, which our plan is to do then in middle October, depending on your comfort level with the language, as well as making sure all your questions are addressed. With that, Mike Atkinson's also here to address any other items I may have missed. But really, this is kind of more supposed to be an informational meeting, so it's really up to direction of the chair how you wish to proceed.
I'm just curious, has anybody expressed an interest in Vernon Hills, or is it too early for that, or?
We've got, very early on, we had several cultivation centers that expressed interest or just looking at specific locations. Typically, the phone conversation would work, they call and say, we're looking at this address, and they don't really know where, they don't often realize that there's a high school located in our Continental Executive Park. As soon as we notify them of that fact, and that's not within.
Yeah, when you look at the dispensaries, which is the yellow map, I mean, there's this little tiny piece of green.
Cultivation centers, yeah.
I'm sorry, the cultivation center. I was actually talking more about the dispensaries. Has there been any contact with questions about dispensaries?
Yeah, we've had a number,
Like-
probably maybe a dozen or so individuals that I'm aware of who've called. Because of the state requirements, a lot of it's on a first-come, first-served basis. The rules have been changing throughout the summer as to what process is going forward. Ultimately, what's happened is, we're definitely, applications are open for people to start applying with the state for dispensaries. We're definitely past that window in terms of
Okay.
that, but I haven't received any calls recently. I don't know if Mike has, but I think the most recent, someone has asked for a letter from the village simply stating that we're looking into it.
Yeah, that's correct. And in fact, as we looked into it, we realized the dispensary didn't meet a separation requirement from a child care facility. So, and I think Joe's right. I think the applications are coming due soon. The act would allow the state to license up to 60 dispensaries that are supposed to be evenly distributed throughout the state, and we're still wondering how that's going to work when we have, real dense populations in the Chicagoland area and obviously lesser down south, but that's for the state to work out. Currently, we have a moratorium that's been in place, but with applications, we're expecting applications to be awarded by the end of this year, and the moratorium runs out at the end of December. So we're kind of at the point where we need to look at these regulations and hopefully have something in place before 2015.
Is there a reason why there's no residential setback for a dispensary? I know there's a 2,500 setback, 2,500 foot setback from a property line for cultivation, but not dispensing.
1,000.
What's the 1,000 square foot?
Well, I could clarify that. The state regulations, when the act was adopted, did require a 2,500-foot setback for cultivation centers from residential districts, but did not require a setback, again, in the state regulations, for dispensaries. It just simply requires that a dispensary can't be located within a residential district.
Because, just in our town, there's a lot of houses that are within 200 feet of a potential dispensary.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. And that would comply with the state regulations. Now, we could, and the Planning and Zoning Commission could consider setback regulations from a residential district for dispensaries, but we have to weigh that with the act, which requires or allows us to provide reasonable zoning regulations. So if we were to come up with regulations that were so restrictive that were in effect not allowing a dispensary, then we wouldn't be in compliance. Our zoning regulations wouldn't be in compliance with the act. So that's the balancing act. If the commission wishes to consider setbacks for dispensaries, it's within your authority to do so, but we need to weigh what the constraints are of the state regulations as well.
Okay.
So when you look is it Centennial Crossing, where literally there's a house and then you go through the woods that are there, which are, and there's business development. So we could look at something like, and I'm just thinking out loud, not saying we should use this number, but like 1,000 feet from residential?
Well, even if you look at Centennial Crossing or you look at the Oaks, that was just
Right,
brought
that too.
forward.
Because I just think of Centennial Crossing because literally they could walk across the street and there's a building.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry. What we could do is, if I may suggest, is, again, because we're weighing are we so restrictive that we're in effect prohibiting it with, hey, let's have a little extra separation from a residential district. We could ask our GIS coordinator to provide additional maps
Well, that's a good idea.
that would show, what if we applied 500, what if we applied 1,000, and then
I
1,500?
think that's a great idea.
And you'd see those three options, and that would help you see how, what the impact would be. I'll pass around as I answer that question. That's a map that we started with that's coming around, and you're going to notice red bubbles. Those bubbles designate nursing homes, child care facilities, and all the other uses that are required to have a 1,000-foot setback for dispensaries. So that's what we started with, to understand, okay, what areas of the village would comply. So what we could do is we could take that map and apply the larger separation that'll increase the size of the bubble, and then that'll affect the change in the map, and we can have that for you for the public hearing.
Okay.
One of the setback requirements for a dispensary is it cannot be within 1,000 feet of a daycare home. Do we have our home daycares registered?
Let me check that for you. Yeah, it's 1,000 feet is required from daycare facilities and schools.
Okay, because I'm looking at section 4.15.5.2, and it says daycare homes as well, on the third and fourth line.
Daycare home, you're right. That would be probably the registered ones. I mean, if somebody, like if you, for example, were taking care of 2 kids, would you be a daycare home? But
If they're not related, that's what constitutes a
then
daycare home.
Even without a license?
If I understand correctly, is if you're you're not in any kind of daycare home that just happens to watch a couple of neighbors' kids, but you're actually licensed through the state of Illinois, and that separation requirement does apply. In the case of our last inquiry, it was in Corporate Woods, and they thought they met the separation requirements. And when we did our research, our GIS coordinator did, there was a home on Woodbine. They were actually out of the village, but it really doesn't matter, that they were within 1,000 feet of that daycare facility. So they would, and we checked with the village attorney, they would not comply with the separation requirements. And it was and the key was they were licensed to do daycare through the state of Illinois.
well, because now if you get into people taking care of children in their home, if they're accepting cash for taking care of those children, they're technically, hopefully, what I'm hoping, Jerry, is for dispensaries, it's 1,000 feet.
That's what I'm
If we get,
right.
as we look at the 500,000, 1,500 feet radius for just setbacks from homes, if we hit the 1,000 feet, that's gonna, from homes, that'll take care of that. If we get,
Because what I would suggest, if we are saying it has to be a licensed daycare home, maybe adding the word licensed within that.
Certainly, licensed by the state of Illinois.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Oh, just on the map, Lifetime Fitness is included, and they do have a daycare facility in the building.
Thank you for that. We'll double check and see if they're licensed through the state of Illinois.
Oh, okay.
One thought I had just in terms of maybe to kind of restructure the conversation is if we want to, if we'd like to, first and foremost, any comments you present or ideas such as like the maps with the 500,000, 1,500, I'm going to create a list and we'll make sure those questions are addressed prior to the next meeting. That way we can kind of move through different areas. Also, if we want to just move through like different, just if we want to go page by page and through the memo, I mean, maybe if we want to first start look at the cultivation centers, because that's probably the low-hanging fruit of discussions based off of the limited area. Just one thing, maybe if we wanted to structure the conversation.
Can I ask a question before we do that? Is this based upon somebody else's ordinance? Or did we just create this?
This is a lot of, we did collect various ordinances throughout the Chicago area. but most of this is based by the Lake County Medical Marijuana Task Force that was assembled from various communities. They met, and we followed that task force through their process, and by design waited until they were done and used the documents that they created. And it really is, it's probably 80 or 90% of the document that's before you tonight.
And have any other villages in Lake County adopted it?
I would think there are, but I don't know who for sure, and we can have that information
I
for you
know
for the public
Deerfield
hearing.
has.
The information we got was from Naperville, Glenview, and a couple other communities in Cook County, and I can't remember if we had a Lake County example when we put this together, but we can have that information for
Okay.
you. Deerfield, thank you.
In regards to cultivation centers, is there a specific, that's page 1, item 1, it discussed the minimum 2,500 foot separation. Is there other specific language? And if you look through the memo, rather.
I had a question on the definition portion there. Under number 2, designated caregiver.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 3.
Okay, sorry.
That's right, you don't have to think.
Yeah, they're there.
Number 4 there, assist with no more than one qualifying patient with his or her medical use of cannabis. Is there a reason for that restriction?
That matches the state regulations that came out of the Rules Committee.
It's weird.
It's for non-medical.
I had the same
people as well.
question about the number 1 specifically. Is that what you're talking about, Jim?
Yeah.
Yeah. A person who assists with no more than one qualifying patient.
Right. That's in federal law, in state law. The reason that is designated caregivers are not licensed medical professionals. So if you were a doctor or a registered nurse or something, you're not going to be a designated caregiver. It's primarily for a family member to assist another family member. So if you had a facility that you were dispensing it, doctors can do it.
Okay. I had a comment on, in dispensing facilities, number 2, on page 2, second paragraph down, where it says, in the last line, the sentence reads, as a result of the goal to have the dispensing facilities geographically dispersed. As we spoke about this, there's 60 throughout the state. It is anticipated that at most only one dispensing facility will be located in Vernon Hills, and I just think that could be located in Vernon Hills. I just think that should be changed to could.
So noted.
And then I had one more that was close to where Jim Heidner's comment was. It was number 3 on the enclosed lock facility. In that paragraph, why are we referring to the people as the cultivation center's agent or dispensing facility's agent? Agent's kind of a different term, and it's not repeated.
What we could do is, and that term came out of the Lake County Task Force, and I would think from Illinois out of the Rules Committee, they defined what an agent is.
It's in the statute.
Yeah, so we could research that and get a definition of agent into this ordinance for you.
It's the statutory definition. The area in a dispensing organization where medical cannabis is stored can only be accessed by dispensing organization agents. So the state uses it in their law.
So the people have to be designated as agents for this role. And is there any special training for that, or is there, I guess the definition of agent in this case will come out on what the specifics are for that.
They must have a pretty good guidelines as to what a dispensary is and who works there and all the qualifications they have to have. Is that
You
kind of what
you
you're
have, you have to get a state identification card from professional regulation or Department of Agriculture for cultivation to be an agent. It's an agent identification card. So it's going to be a state-regulated position.
That's correct, and if I understand it correctly, that's subject to background checks and things such as that.
So this is going to be a real role for them. I mean, they're going to have to earn this term to be able to do this. They're going to have to be trained specifically, educated, have some kind of background that allows them to qualify.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. And just be over the age of 18.
That's per state regulations as well, and I'm not sure what's magical about 18 versus 21. It caught my eye too,
Yeah, it's interesting.
but I can tell you that the 18 age is just consistent with state regulations.
Where are we?
Yeah, we were, so up till page 2, it's just kind of an outline of kind of what the act says and everything else. Then it goes in draft amendments, which right now we're kind of looking at the definitions. Was there any other questions related to definitions, or on page 4 starts with section 4.15.4 on requirements for cultivation centers? Were there any questions related to those?
Under 4.15.4.2, setback requirements, section 2, it says the facility should not be located within 2,500 feet of the property line of a pre-existing property zone for residential use. Are you intending the definition of pre-existing property line to be those pre-existing property lines at the time of passage of this text amendment, or at the time of application for zoning or special use for the center?
We can clarify the language. The intent is that if the facility has now located itself there in compliance with village requirements and properly licensed, and then if for some reason, if another property rezoned to a residential use and now no longer meets the setback requirement, this facility it can remain. So that's the intent behind the provision. We can find some clear language for it.
I guess what I'm more concerned about is, right now, we've got these neat little maps. What if a use comes into the village and it's permitted in one of these categories, daycare center, school, etc., and these have already been drawn? Is it 2,500 feet? It's actually in 1 and 2. 2 is just easier to read. Is it as of the date of passage we're measuring 2,500 feet, or as of the date of application for the special use permit? It seems to me it should be as of application.
Yeah, as of application, or or maybe if you think at the time the special use permit to have this is approved, date of approval, the ordinance, either one. But I agree with you. It's one of those dates.
It might be hard to do it as of approval because you could go through the whole process, and then that's an odd right to take away.
Because if you
We
Yeah,
can do
it-
it
we
as
could-
of application.
Yeah.
I mean,
Application? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
which means that if we publish maps, we're going to publish maps that have some sort of disclaimer or caveat that it's as of a certain date, and depending upon additional uses that could be permitted in the village, it could change where you can locate, right?
Correct. I don't know if we've discussed the logistics of placing maps online just because of exactly what you said. I mean, specifically to daycare facilities, if license change or new locations pop up. Currently, our office space is 20% vacant, and
Right.
I mean, certainly things could change that we can't predict as of right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much we want to, because I think your point is very well taken. We actually started out thinking, hey, we'll create an overlay district.
Right,
and
that's right.
But then things change.
Yeah.
You know, new businesses come in and we realized we can't do that. The map would be changing yearly. So we decided not to do an overlay district, or at least not to recommend it. The maps we have here right now are more for your information. They're not
Yeah,
intended
sure.
to be part of the zoning map at all.
I would assume if a dispensary were to go in the village somewhere, assuming in one of those blue areas, that would prohibit a daycare center, for example, from moving into within 1,000 feet of that dispensary because they were there first. Does that sound logical, or?
Well, I guess the only way I can't answer the question, in terms of our ordinance, the ordinance wouldn't necessarily prohibit it, because that's what the whole pre-existing language that we're trying to clean up. But the real question is, would the state of Illinois issue a license to that daycare provider, knowing
Oh,
they've
all right,
issued
I
a
forgot.
license?
Okay. I
Probably
forgot.
not.
Well, I didn't know what else. I use daycare as an example. Daycare, we're not going to put a school there, so, all right, yeah.
Why not?
And, the other thing we have to remember is that even if we set whatever the parameters are, look at all the little red circles, someone still is going to have to come in here, find a spot that's in one of the little white areas, then still go through the whole application process, and they still may not get picked, because it's a limited number for the state. And, we may not be in the prime area that they consider for Lake County. So,
But to your point, if something was to surface as a type of care facility for, it could be older people, it could be any number of care facilities. If they were to come in later, I think they would have to, unless they're licensed by the state, they would have to acquiesce to the business or organization that would be the cultivation center
Or dispensary.
or dispensary.
And we could then refuse to allow it.
Allow the
New tenant,
new tenant, the caregiver.
whatever that is,
Whatever
right.
that might be.
Whatever the restricted tenant would be, they can't move within that distance of these facilities.
Yeah, because they do identify them as businesses, and so
Right.
they are. and
That
should
would
be.
seem logical.
Right,
I mean, if you're there first, you're there first.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Is there any language for the dispensaries being so close to a park like VHAC? Because you could walk from the football fields to a dispensary. So is there anything with the park district being,
There's not with the Park District. A separation requirement?
yeah, separation between a park district function and a dispensary?
That's not, there isn't a state regulation like that, and we haven't tried to tailor anything like that in the regulations in front of you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the little bridge that goes from VHAC to where 740 was, and the park.
Sorry I delayed. I was still thinking of that past question,
Sorry.
and
It'll be,
I'll let the, but I think we're gonna have to, I think we need to, we'll dig in a little deeper, talk to the village attorney, but my understanding is that if you meet all the requirements and you're a dispensary and you get a license and the village approves your special use and you're there, the fact that a daycare facility now opens up 2 years later, 900 feet away, and I need to verify this, okay? But my understanding is, unless the state decides they don't want to issue the daycare facility, they can be there. And it doesn't mean the dispensary would have to up and move away. They could, they could both exist there because the daycare facility wasn't pre-existing, and that's what, but we'll dig a little
Seems
deeper and get that
No,
verified for you.
I think you're probably right. If it's an as-of-right use, we probably can't then prohibit it based on this.
Right.
And these are also renewable licenses. They're not in perpetuity.
Correct.
So
Annual,
every year.
annual, yeah.
So it would also become state regulatory question. Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
but we could pass zoning that you can't have a daycare facility within 1,000 feet of a dispensary.
Yes, you can. You could put that under the daycare facility
And I'm not trying to
regulation.
defend these dispensaries, we're probably not even going to get one. But it just doesn't seem fair to me that if you have a dispensary, even though they have to renew their license every year, if a daycare facility moves 900 feet away, you could technically say, no, we're not going to renew your license.
But I think your point is well taken, because, I mean, right now, I think there was, when the laws first passed, only 40 conditions that would be eligible for medical marijuana, and I think they've already added to. So the idea that this is
It'll change.
just going to
The
stay the
living,
same.
yep.
So whatever language we look at
Okay.
should be thought of, in my opinion at least, as language that might be here for in any type of state expansion of this program.
Well, I think we may want to consider that whatever the language is, that these types of facilities can be limited to certain things, that those certain things cannot be built within an existing one of these facilities. You know, does that make, just flip it and make it an ordinance? That you can't, well,
Wait, I didn't follow that. Do you want to try that again?
I'm not a lawyer.
That's a good thing.
Are you suggesting some sort of zoning language
Can't put a
change?
nursery within 1,000 feet of a
Yeah.
dispensary.
Yeah, and you,
And they
right.
restrict dispensary.
Yeah, that's what I
That's
thought
what
I
I'm
heard.
saying.
That's
That
what I'm
that can
saying.
be done if the Planning and Zoning Commission decides they want to recommend
It's
that.
just a thought.
You know, it's just,
I think it's reasonable because it's a business.
And if for some reason they're not a good business, then they wouldn't get renewed annually for other reasons. So that's, I think the annual renewal is what hopefully will keep them operating properly and functioning well within the laws. Because if they don't, they're gone.
And we have to look upon this as being something, you know, like Joe said, that this is going to expand, you know.
Yeah.
It's happening throughout, you know, in other places in the United States, so Illinois is going to be no different.
Right.
this is for a children's daycare facility?
Well, whatever the restrictions are
For daycare facilities, okay.
for what can't, these dispensaries can't be within 1,000 feet of.
Reciprocal should be true.
That's it, thank you.
I'm not sure. I understand what you're saying. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, because I don't know if we want to start having zoning so interrelated that as of right uses are no longer as of right. Instead, they're measured by what's there versus against the district. You know, if we're going to do that, we might as well make stuff special uses and not
I-
have them as of right.
I was-
Because I see
see
that as
that.
being a very difficult, especially on your department, Mike, trying to police that. Like, because if you have as of right, you have as of right.
Yeah, it would be very, very difficult.
Right.
In fact, that's what was going through my head as I was writing down my
All
notes
right.
is make daycare facilities a special use. It's really the only way, you know.
Right.
But
Well, isn't this business a special use?
Yes.
Yes.
That's what's before you tonight.
Yeah, so,
Conversely, yeah. But but the discussion is, at the time of application and approval of the special use, they meet the 1,000-foot setback requirement. What happens when a daycare facility comes in 2 years later and they're 800 feet away?
Well,
What
it
do
certainly
we-
doesn't affect the pre-existing use, because now it's just simply a non-conforming legal use.
Legal,
The question is, does it affect the applicant for as-of-right zoning, if it's as-of-right, that's within that foot? And, I mean, that's, I guess, a policy decision as to whether it would. But if it does, I think that's a difficult process to implement through your department.
Agreed.
Well, then we don't, yeah.
but how does that affect the renewing of the license yearly, annually?
I don't think it matters because it talks about pre-existing.
We don't control, the village doesn't control the license.
No.
No,
State.
No.
Oh, okay.
And the way the statute reads, it talks about pre-existing
Oh,
use. So I
all
think they look at it at the time you go in.
Yeah,
And that's-
agreed.
Okay.
No one knows because they've never tested it, but my guess is that's what they would look at.
I think so, because and that's what, that's the basis for us using the pre-existing language in the amendment that's before you as well.
Right.
okay, I want to move,
Any other comments related to cultivation centers?
Yeah, I have a question generally,
We can
which is
move
going to
past
apply to
that.
both cultivation
Or
centers
Joe.
and dispensaries. And it's really, it's kind of twofold. Number one, has the police department looked at these maps and determined, because the business parks aren't heavy traffic, like at some of these hours in the evening and after dark, and because of, at least currently, under the financial regulations, most of these businesses are cash businesses. You can't use credit cards, you can't use insurance, it's mountains of cash and, jewel shopping bags that are being taken care of. And when looking at some of the security and video surveillance, it's made available, for not less than 48 hours. I mean, is this sufficient security from a safety standpoint? Because this isn't like on a heavy traffic road, next to, I'm not suggesting we want to do this, in the mall or next to Walmart where there's lots of people and it's much harder to, pull this off versus in what are really somewhat remote, if that's the right word, areas of the village, other than the River Tree one, which is probably impractical, you know.
Understood. The police have reviewed the text amendments regarding security, and after hearing your comments, I will make sure they also review the map so they have an opportunity to comment on that and the particular security issues with buildings that are not located on a Milwaukee or Route 45 or a more primary highway.
And especially when you get into the business parks, there's some large setbacks some of those buildings have from the street, either behind landscaping or just distance for lighting. So my concern would be, and this is on both, is this just sufficient what we have here from a security standpoint?
Understood. We'll make sure they weigh in
And
on that.
I'll be candid with you, I don't really know how you address it, and I don't know whether we have, is there a requirement for businesses to have direct alarms to the police department, that kind of thing? It doesn't say it here, but it just in general, I guess, is my question.
I'm not aware if it's in state regulations or anything like that.
Do we even have that? Is that an available option for a business?
It's an option, not a requirement, but, given your points that you're making tonight, does the commission want to consider, or do you want staff to research that if you are a dispensary or cultivation center, you are required to be hooked, to have a 24-hour monitoring service that's hooked into the village's telecommunications center? Is that what I'm? If someone breaks in there, they've got immediate notification right in our own police department.
I do believe the state has some pretty hefty language in their existing regulations. However, as part of the special use, certainly that would, I'm sure, if it weren't included in the zoning language in terms of a text amendment, I can't fathom there not being a requirement to provide security information as to how it would be operational, just through the simple technical review comments that would be made by the police department. So whether it's included in here specifically in the zoning code or not, I think during the special use process, certainly that would be something that would be put in as a condition of approval.
Do we know in any other states that have medical marijuana established locations, do they have crime around their dispensaries? Do we know?
Yeah.
They do? Okay.
I have something that I was thinking about on conduct on the site.
It's all cash.
And this would actually be for both dispensaries and cultivation centers. And I'm not sure if or how we could do this, but I would not want to allow firearms on the premise. I would like that to be excluded.
Did the state address that?
I could ask our village attorney to weigh in on that. I don't, if the chairman wants to weigh in on that, but I
Sure.
think
I mean-
that falls under a separate set of regulations. I can't answer that question. We'll certainly look into that. I know we just passed new regulations where, in certain instances, you can choose to say no firearms, but, and maybe that would apply here. I'm not sure, but.
Well, that would actually be covered under the concealed carry laws of Illinois. I think there's 30 some odd places you cannot carry a concealed firearm. There's a lot in Illinois, this building being one of them. Any establishment where the liquor sales are greater than 50%. So that might be something, looking at the concealed carry laws, if they've added medical marijuana dispensaries.
And we'll do that. We'll work
Yeah,
with village
that would
attorney.
be in the concealed carry laws, probably.
Thank you.
That's what I had
Yep, that's a
figured, but
great
I'm not
point.
sure, but I just want to make sure it's
No.
addressed.
I would be surprised if it weren't in there, based on the other 30-plus places that they already have restrictions.
And I don't think a dispensary would want to allow guns in there either, just because of the very nature of cash flow and everything
Are you
else,
talking about they wouldn't want to allow it by patrons or by agents?
by patrons.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm not sure how the village can enforce that with it being private property. That would be the only area that I'm not sure of. what
Private
level.
businesses have the ability to put the proper signage, as do homes, by the way.
Yeah.
That if you don't want concealed carry in that site. I don't know, again, if the Illinois concealed carry laws don't address that, then if we could zone that, we would require they be restricted concealed carry. Boy, we're getting into a lot of,
Well, no, I understand. First of all, we'll figure out, does the conceal and carry law apply to cultivation and dispensaries in terms of
Yep.
you can't do it. And then if it doesn't apply, then does the village have the authority to create its own regulation prohibiting it? And we'll get those answers for you.
I want to talk about that word agent again, because they refer to dispensing personnel that are locked in these facilities, or that once they're in as staff. So is every employee of a dispensing facility going to be considered an agent?
I'm sorry, is that right under dispensary or is it cultivation?
Section 4.15.4.5, it's on page 5 at the top.
So that's our cultivation center.
Cultivation center, staff, yeah,
4.15.4 point,
at the top. It's just the term. Sometimes they refer to people as staff, sometimes they refer to them as agents, and I'm just wondering if there's something magical about either one of these.
Is the agent the owner, operator, and the staff just people he hires
To move things around within the
move things around and work the cash register? I don't know.
I haven't read it that close, but I can tell you that the Act defines an agent as someone who's carrying an agent identification card, which is a regulated position by the state of Illinois, and it refers to agents having the exclusive right to access parts of the buildings, et cetera. So whether it means someone can sit at the cash register, that I don't know.
Because, I mean,
Yeah.
it addresses 18-year-olds that can be staff, and I doubt they're going to give an 18-year-old, make them an agent. One of the, whatever, 60
Probably not.
agents in the state,
Yeah.
I would think not. You know. Maybe, who
Yeah.
knows?
I
Maybe,
think,
maybe he's an expert.
Scott, to answer your question, I think once we complete our research of what an agent is, that will lead to the answer of what a staff member is. And if we need to clean something up with that, with those words, we will.
Yeah, it talks about staff on page 7 at the top 2 for dispensary staff. So it's that word, staff or agent, and who's able to work in these places and why.
Understood.
I want to move forward on to parking. On the 6th page, in 4.15.5.3, they talk about these facilities shall be classified as medical, health, dental, clinics, spas, clubs. And the requirement for that is 10 spaces per doctor. So,
It's 1 per 200 square feet.
okay, one for 200 square feet? Okay.
Going back to the previous discussion on agent staff, can we just put a definition as part of the definition, what an agent is as part of this?
That's my thought. Once we do our research, we can offer you a definition for agent. And then with staff, one of two things. We may have to use a different word than staff. Some of those words in the text may have to be changed to agent. And we may also need to add a definition of staff for you. And, because there might be a difference between a staff member and an agent. Maybe an agent can go anywhere in the facility and a staff member can only go in certain. So once we do our research, we'll understand what we need to change. And probably definitions is what's going to make it clear.
Okay.
So I agree with you.
Actually, the state law says cultivation center agent means a principal, officer, board member, employee, or agent of a registered cultivation center who is 21 years of age or older, has not been convicted, blah, blah, blah. So it's going to cover everybody that works for them.
Okay, so
But it's 21. That's for cultivation.
So an agent then doesn't have to have a state ID, is that what?
No, an agent does.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can't you just define all those people as agents?
And they need IDs, yeah. Right.
So, yeah, I mean, what we could do it certainly sounds like agent covers everyone. So maybe we go through the document and wherever so we include the definition of agent to be consistent with how the state defines it. And then everywhere we see the word staff, we change it to agent so there isn't any implied
Except
or
that had the
inference that a
exclusion
staff
of-
person is different than an agent.
Yeah, you had to be 21 for that.
This one's 21, right.
Since the dispensaries are probably going to be leased office space, did you find any research of how, is there any restriction with the landlord and his access to the facility and also cleaning staff and those type of people?
Well, they'd have to be a card holder. They'd have to have a license to
So
enter that facility.
would the building owner have to be licensed then, too?
I don't think you do.
I don't know the answer to
I don't
that
think you
question.
do. I think you can lease
Yeah.
as an owner.
I think so, I just don't know for sure. I would guess most of these spaces will be leased rather than owned, but we can certainly, we'll research that and give you a clear answer at the public hearing.
Section 4.15.5.5 about the age and access limitation. What if a card holder or a caregiver brings their child that's under 18? The child cannot be left outside if it's a small child. So we have a situation that I think needs to be addressed.
Well, this reflects state regulations. I think if you're going to pick it up, I think the state's expectation is that you need to find someone to watch your child during the time that you're picking this up.
Is this signage under 415.4.4, is that signage requirements consistent with our other zoning?
It's much more restrictive than our sign code would otherwise
So it's
allow.
smaller.
Yeah.
10 square feet is small.
Yeah.
That's what I
I mean, our sign code would allow 1 square foot per linear foot of building or tenant frontage. And if you have a second frontage, you can have a second wall sign. This says you can have one wall sign that's,
Square feet.
yeah, and that's it.
Yeah, that's small. Which is
So
fine.
if you're
will
certainly
have to
welcome
Google
to
it.
discuss it further and direct us otherwise.
Yeah, they don't really need to advertise.
Put it on the village's website.
I mean, we looked at, at least I did personally, I think, when I looked at this, I kept, just a pure zoning perspective, I just couldn't help but think, I wish the state would say that pharmacies should be the ones who dispense this because they're set up to do
We had
so.
that, yeah.
And it just seemed like something that is, you get a prescription and you go and you pick it up. Now, the only difference is there's far more security issues because there's a target for people that want to go get this stuff and illegally, but just zoning use-wise. So, if you're get a prescription from your physician, they're probably going to direct you to the closest dispensary, and then you're going to go pick it up. You're not going to drive by and say, hey, there's a dispensary there. One of these days, I'm going to stop in and go buy,
Do any
So
other,
signage isn't important.
any states use existing pharmacies for this?
I don't know the answer to
In
that.
general, no, because it's a Class 1 controlled substance, and pharmacies have Class 1 controlled substances licensed to dispense, and it's then a problem under federal law.
Okay.
So they generally don't
Oh, I
use
get
them.
it, I get it. Because
Yeah.
when you think of
Because-
Vicodin, and I don't know the rest of them, but there's a whole bunch
All
of them.
narcotics.
Yeah, that are more desirable than marijuana.
Well, I think
That was on
also
tape,
there's
you understand.
spatial,
No. From a crime perspective. I didn't mean it that way.
Thank you for clarifying.
there's also spatial issues. I mean, for storing this material.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Because it's not only in one form, it's
Yeah.
in multiple
Yeah.
forms. So putting the burden on a existing pharmacy to be able to store all this would be kind of rough.
Well, thousands of pharmacies with marijuana in them too, you'd have a supply issue. I mean, that's a lot of facilities. I wondered the same thing, though.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it just, I meant it only from purely a zoning perspective, that it felt more like a pharmacy, but obviously there's more to it than that.
I'm going by memory here, but I thought I read something that pharmacists cannot dispense.
I'm not aware of that. That might be true.
Within
I'm not
part of
aware of
the
that.
state.
No.
But you'd have to get, first of all, an agent license to do it, because the dispensaries are licensed separately from pharmacies. And registered pharmacists are a separately licensed professions. I'd assume that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. I think that's correct.
On your sign question that we started talking about, what is a botanical in nature meaning for us? So clinical or botanical in nature?
Cannabis, but not pot. joint.
Did the state have an example of different words that are permitted?
Well, it's, no. No, why I'm smiling is that when I put this together originally, I thought of every slang term I could possibly think of and, thought back to my, and I had a list that was very, very long. And then we decided, no matter how much we try to think of all the slang names and get them in there, we don't want to infer these are the only slang names, because as time goes on, different slang names come up, and we wanted to keep it simple so it's easy to enforce. It's just botanical, like cannabis is a botanical name, or any other. There's a couple other examples that unfortunately are not coming to me, but that kind of a name.
Any other questions?
Is the police department looking for any kind of periodic, from its standpoint, for lack of a better word, review or, I was going to say search, but that's not the word I want to use legally, but review of these facilities that they'd have to agree to?
Inspection, review.
Maybe, okay, maybe that's a better word.
We can certainly look into that.
But once again, is it something the police department have they weighed in at all on any of these things, or?
I could say that I haven't posed that question to them. They haven't mentioned it, but we also haven't posed that question to them, and we can certainly do that and see what the reaction is.
And it can't be a scheduled visit.
So it'd basically be consent to inspection or review by, government authorities.
In section 415.5.6 in the security lighting video surveillance, page 7, the last sentence of number 2 says, said recording shall be made available to the Vernon Hills Police Department upon request. I think that was kind of the nature of being able to kind of come in and just say, we want to see your video.
Yeah, and I was thinking, the only example I can think of right now is a massage establishment. If you read through our licensing requirements, we have the right to just go in there anytime we want.
Right.
See how everything's going on, making sure everything's in compliance. Can we have similar language with dispensaries and cultivation centers? We'll ask the PD and get their reaction and give you some feedback.
Back to the security lighting video surveillance under 4.15.5.6 on page 7, where it lists the video surveillance equipment whose live images can be viewed by dispensary staff and continually recorded for no less than 48 hours. If you're going to have someone who's slowly siphoning it off, it may take a while. 48 hours may not be long enough to get any evidence. Might not be a bad idea to have like a 30-day recorder. I know those are pretty standard. They're digital recorders.
Yeah, 48 hours is a very short period of time.
Right. I mean, a 30-day one would be. I mean, it takes up no more space than
No.
a 48-hour one,
No.
and you'd get all.
They do it on hard drives
Right.
now, or flash
Exactly.
drives or something anyway.
Great.
Yep.
If you're going to catch somebody, you want to see them do it a few times. So.
Understood.
The access limitations, which are primarily access limitations for dispensaries, not for cultivation, because the public really doesn't visit the cultivation, is that you have to be at least 18 years of age in the facility. Is it just that we want to have it 18 years of age, or is it 18 years of age, or is it that they have to be either a designated caregivers, they have to have that card, or they have to have be a card holder themselves? I mean, right now you could go shopping if you were just 18, it looks like, under this statute, under our ordinance.
Wait, I think I can.
Because then it says
you
the
can't go
next,
shopping.
because then it says the next one shall be limited exclusively to dispensary staff card holders designated.
It
Should we have
should
to
say-
tie those together more?
Yeah, we can. We should have language in there that says card holder.
It says that when you get a few more paragraphs down.
Okay, so just make it clearer.
Maybe, yeah.
So because it's trying to allow card holders and designated
Right.
caregivers of a certain age.
Okay. Because it says it down here, but not up here. Yeah, okay. Anybody else have anything?
No, Mike, you said you were gonna look at the proximity and different distances for dispensaries from residential and park areas? Okay.
Yeah, right now it's just not in a residential district. So we'll get you 3 maps, I'm thinking, if it's okay. 500 foot, 1,000 foot, and 1,500 foot. And if the maps start looking kind of crazy, we might give you 100 or 200 foot, you know, we'll
Yeah.
just see how the findings are and
Okay.
give you examples and something to choose from.
Could you also say parks?
Yeah, I was saying if you look at the blue areas, they back up to Aspen, the parks behind Aspen Drive, and then also behind VHAC.
Okay, we'll look at parks too. It could be when we apply we could say, for parks, we could say not in a park, and then see how that map looks, how restrictive it looks, and then do the same thing and build out. We'll just see how that, certainly we know where the VHAC is. I'm trying to, in my mind, picture where all the other parks are. They're probably nestled in the middle of a residential neighborhood, so maybe that wouldn't have as big an impact.
Yeah, there's only, I think, a few that might that would affect
Sure.
that. Yeah, along there.
That edge here, and
Yeah.
then right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that might work, yeah.
On section 415.5.6, point number 4, where we're talking about a refuge container shall be located in a secure enclosed building, shall not be outdoors. The reason for that being,
The reason for that is essentially, this is where trash is going. If someone's looking for medical marijuana and they're thinking maybe there's some residue or other material that they can obtain that has this, they would attempt to try to get into the dumpster or refuse container. This way it would be in a safe.
but are they
Enclosed.
allowed to dispose of any marijuana within the waste cycle, the system? Or do they have to have special disposal?
Would it
A
be like
special
medical
service.
waste?
I don't know for sure, but I would think like with similar to pharmaceutical products, there's strict requirements for which you throw this, you dispose of this. There's probably, I'm guessing there has to be a certified hauler that picks this up and such. But
Are you
the
looking at
concern is that the
something
person
else?
who might be interested in looking doesn't know there's a regulation that they couldn't put it out
Right.
there. They just think there might be, so they're gonna try.
They may be after a brownie crumb or something.
Yeah.
What, you know, you don't want people dumpster diving for garbage.
Right.
Yeah.
What the law says is, after any cannabis-infused products that are not sold to registered qualifying patients, documentation of destruction and disposal shall be retained, so they have to dispose it in a specific way and destroy it.
Probably like medical waste where it needs to be incinerated or something.
So is that part of the licensing that they have to separate
Okay,
that
that wasn't-
trash
yeah.
from normal
Here,
trash?
a dispensary organization shall, prior to the destruction, notify the Department of Financial and Professional Regulations and the state police. So you got it, yeah.
So we're just trying to avoid scavengers who think something might be there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Hungry animals. So if I may, I'll maybe provide kind of a recap of kind of my notes and just make sure that I have everything that I have. So first and foremost, provide some maps showing 500, 1,000, 1,500 buffer from residential and parks, but then also taking a look at that as it relates to, if it's, depending on what the map looks like, we'll go smaller. We'll provide several different maps just to kind of provide conversation piece. We'll take a look at how, we'll add some language as it relates to state licensed daycare facilities or licenses. We'll also include in the definitions language as it relates to agents or staff, making sure that language is consistent with both state regulations, but also making sure the document as a whole is clear. We'll also take a look at pre-existing property zoned for residential use, and we'll clear up that language to be as of application. We'll clear that up. That's in page 4 for setback requirements for cultivation centers, but we'll also include that for language as it relates to dispensaries. We'll also review any potential reciprocal restrictions on facilities being close to dispensaries. As I think Mike indicated, logistically that would be very difficult to enforce, but we'll take a look at that as to. In addition to that, we'll have a thorough conversation with the police department as it relates to security. We'll have them take another look at the maps, as well as the maps that we're planning to create as it relates to different buffers. We'll also have them take a look at video surveillance. We'll also look at whether or not conceal and carry and what restrictions might be able to be placed as it relates to that.
I did look up the concealed carry. It wasn't listed, but I'm not sure if I had the most current one.
It is.
Yeah.
We'll take a look. And yeah, I think they've been changing the regulations pretty much every day, I think, at one point. We'll also see if we can create our own regulations as it relates to that.
The inspection one for the police?
Inspections, yep, inspections. We'll also include additional language as it relates to parking to actually specifically say the 1 per 200 square feet of I think is it tenant space or building space? I would assume tenant space.
What's in there right now is 1 per 200 square feet. Is that satisfactory? I mean, when you look up the parking requirement in the zoning code for wholesale, it says 1 per 200 square feet. For medical, blah, 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 blah. Is that satisfactory?
That's for cultivation you're talking about, right?
For the cultivation zoning, it's not 1 for every 900.
That's correct. And then
And-
dispensary is 1 per 200.
1 for 200. Yeah, I didn't see the 200. All I saw was 10 spaces per doctor, but,
Are we okay with the 1 per 200?
oh, yeah.
Okay.
And we'll include that specifically in that language so it's clear. We'll also add language that relates to age and access limitations. We'll tighten up that language so it's, as Chairman Morris indicated, it's restrictions as it relates to card holders, et cetera. Again, we'll take a look. We'll kind of mirror the language that we have related to massage parlors in terms of access for law enforcement personnel. We'll also increase the hours from 48 hours of video surveillance being recorded and stored to 30 days. And we'll take a look at we'll verify the state regulations on medical waste, or on, excuse me, not medical waste, but on refuse, and just ensure that whatever language they have is spelled out potentially in here just for reinforcing those restrictions. And that is what I had.
The only one I had beyond that was talking to the police department, seeing what their opinion is on requiring that the burglar alarm for these facilities be tied into the village's 24-hour monitoring station. Otherwise, that matches my notes, Joe.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay. The minutes. We have the minutes from the August 6, 2014 meeting. Before you ask to approve it, even though I was not here, I did make 2 motions, apparently. So maybe we should make that be Jim, I assume, made the motions? Okay.
And then the votes also,
That I don't
the
know.
vote is recorded properly, but it's
Oh, you're right.
summarized incorrectly.
Good point. You're right.
It says 4-2 on the first one and
5-1.
5-1 on the second. They should both be 3-2.
Okay, any additional? With that, we have a motion to approve with those changes. We need a second.
Second?
Any discussion on that? Okay, we can do that by acclamation. All in favor?
Aye.
And
I abstain.
And I abstain because I wasn't here. Okay, anything else we need to know this evening?
One item will be going before the village board for a concept presentation, I believe, next Tuesday. That is for the Oaks property. That triangle piece of property that's in the front on US 45 that currently is zoned B1. They are looking to rezone that to R7 to allow an expansion of the existing townhomes and apartments. So they're essentially keeping the same model, the same aesthetic look as the existing apartments, and then just expanding it to two-story. I believe it's 24 unit apartment building at that location. The way they've explained it to me is leasing is going exceedingly well. The market seems to be just really benefiting. They hit the market at the right time, so looking to continue that momentum. Staff has had concerns in the past as to whether or not any commercial use could ultimately go at that property, and so it's something that staff has been supportive of, rezoning that to be residential and allowing that to continue. The other location, and this is, they haven't submitted yet their final concept presentation, but they're planning on doing this in phases. The first is that triangle piece of property, the second being on that emergency access way into the forest edge. That was a requirement that they had to purchase the land to acquire access way into. There's a piece of property that is currently in the covenants for Corporate Woods that they're looking to potentially put townhomes at that location. There's certain covenant restrictions because of the Corporate Woods and receiving approval from Van Vlissigen to allow residential property in there. There's also concerns as to landscape or tree preservation and what existing trees are there since it's heavily forested. That's kind of a long laundry list of concerns on that piece of property that to me it'll be interesting to see if they actually incorporate that into their approvals initially or if that's more of a down the road we're going to come back before the P&Z. But that is one thing that they're looking at. And as of right now, that's the only outstanding item looking to go before concept review for the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. With that, thanks again to Mike for joining us on this beautiful evening. And we have a motion to adjourn. We need a second. Anyone opposed? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And we're adjourned. Good night.